lonely rancher for years, until the Apache girl said, "I want to be closer to you." The ranch sat far from the noise of towns and highways. Wide lands stretched in every direction, dry in some places, green in others, shaped by years of hard work and weather. The rancher had lived there alone for a long time. No one remembered exactly when he chose this life, only that he had been there for years, waking before sunrise and sleeping after dark, following the same quiet routine day after day. Each morning he rose before the sun fully appeared. The sky was often painted with soft colors, light orange, pale pink, and deep blue. He would stand for a moment outside his small house, breathing in the cool air. The land smelled of earth, grass, and animals. These moments were peaceful, yet they reminded him how alone he was. No voice greeted him. No footsteps followed him out the door. Just the sound of wind and distant animals. He moved through his chores with skill and patience. He fed the animals, checked water supplies, repaired fences, and made sure everything was in order. His hands were rough from years of work, marked by small scars that told silent stories. He spoke very little, even to the animals. Words felt unnecessary most of the time. Still, when the days grew long and quiet, he sometimes caught himself talking softly, almost without realizing it. People from nearby areas knew of him but did not know him well. Some said he was distant. Others said he preferred being alone. A few believed he was carrying pain from his past. None of them were completely wrong. Long ago, life had taken things from him, people he loved, plans he once had, and trust he had placed in others. Instead of fighting the pain, he had chosen distance. The land never asked questions, the animals never judged. Out here he felt safe. The house he lived in was small but strong, built with care and repaired many times. Inside it was simple. There were no extra decorations, no pictures on the walls except one old photo placed carefully on a shelf. He rarely looked at it, but he never moved it either. At night, after a long day, he sat quietly, eating simple meals and listening to the sounds outside. The wind through the trees, the movement of animals, and the steady rhythm of nature filled the space where conversation once lived. Even though he chose this life, loneliness did not disappear. It settled quietly, like dust that slowly gathers in corners. During the day, work kept his mind busy, but at night, memories returned. He remembered laughter from long ago, shared meals, and voices that once filled his life. These memories did not come with anger. They came softly, carrying both warmth and sadness. He often wondered how things might have been different, but he never allowed himself to dwell on those thoughts for too long. Seasons passed one after another. Summers were hot and demanding. Winters were cold and still. Spring brought new life, while autumn reminded him of change. Through it all, the rancher remained steady, dependable, and alone. The land depended on him, and he took that responsibility seriously. Caring for the ranch gave his life purpose, even when his heart felt empty. Sometimes people passed by the ranch. Travelers, workers, or neighbors stopped briefly, usually for practical reasons. He was polite but distant. He answered questions simply and avoided personal talk. When they left, silence returned quickly. He told himself this was better. Connection had brought pain before, and pain was something he did not wish to invite again. Yet, deep down, he felt something missing. He noticed it in small ways, when he fixed a fence and thought how much easier it would be with help. When he cooked more food than he needed out of habit. When the sun set beautifully and there was no one to share the moment with. These thoughts came quietly, and he pushed them away, reminding himself that he had chosen this life. The land around the ranch held history. Nearby communities had lived there long before fences and property lines existed. The rancher respected that history, even though he rarely spoke about it. He believed the land carried memory and meaning, much like people did. This belief made him careful with how he treated it. He worked with patience, never rushing, never wasting. As years passed, the rancher became known as someone dependable but distant. Children from nearby areas whispered stories about him, imagining him as mysterious or unfriendly. Adults knew better. They understood he was simply quiet, shaped by a life that taught him caution. Still, very few tried to get close. Silence can build walls as strong as stone. One evening, after finishing his work, he stood watching the sky grow dark. The stars appeared slowly, one by one. He felt the familiar weight of loneliness press against him. He told himself it would pass, just as it always did. He had survived many quiet nights before. He would survive this one too. He did not know that life was already moving toward change. At that moment, he believed his days would continue the same way they always had, quiet mornings, long afternoons, and silent nights. He believed connection was something from another life, not meant for him anymore. As he went inside and closed the door, the ranch fell silent once more. The wind moved gently across the land, carrying stories yet to be told. The rancher, unaware of what lay ahead, settled into another night alone, convinced that solitude was his only companion and that his heart had learned all it needed to learn. But life, as it often does, had other plans waiting just beyond the edge of his quiet world. A few days after that quiet evening, the routine of the ranch changed in a small but noticeable way. It happened so gently that the rancher did not realize at first how important it would become. One morning, while checking the fence near the edge of his land, he noticed someone standing at a distance. She did not approach quickly. She waited, as if giving him space. She was a young Apache woman from a nearby community. She had come to the area before, but never this close to his land. This time, she raised her hand slightly in greeting, calm and respectful. The rancher felt a moment of surprise. Visitors were rare, especially ones who did not arrive with a clear demand or problem. He walked toward her slowly, his steps careful. His face remained neutral, but his eyes showed curiosity. She greeted him politely and explained that she was checking on the condition of the land and animals nearby. Her voice was steady, neither nervous nor overly confident. She spoke simply without trying to impress him. Their first conversation was short. She asked about the water source and the health of the animals. He answered with brief but honest replies. There was no awkward pressure, no need to fill the silence. When the conversation ended, she thanked him and stepped away, leaving as quietly as she had arrived. That should have been the end of it. Yet, a few days later, she returned. This time, she brought supplies to trade, nothing unusual, just practical items. The rancher noticed something different about her. She did not rush. She did not act uncomfortable around his silence. She seemed at ease with the slow pace of the ranch. They spoke again, a little longer this time. She asked about the weather patterns, the animals, and how long he had lived there. He answered carefully, choosing his words with the same care he used when fixing a fence. She listened closely, not interrupting, not pushing him to share more than he wanted. As days passed, her visits became part of the rhythm of the ranch. She came for small reasons, sometimes to help, sometimes to check on shared land boundaries, sometimes simply to talk. The rancher did not question it. He told himself it was just practical cooperation. Still, he noticed how the air felt lighter when she was around. She worked alongside him when needed, never acting like she knew better, never slowing him down. She learned his routines quickly. When they worked together, there was an unspoken understanding. They moved without needing many words. It reminded him of a time long ago when cooperation felt natural. Unlike others, she did not ask about his past. She did not try to break his silence. She accepted it. When he spoke, she listened. When he stayed quiet, she did not seem bothered. This made him feel comfortable in a way he had not felt in years. One afternoon, while fixing a broken fence post, the rancher noticed her watching the land with quiet respect. She spoke about how the land remembered those who cared for it. Her words were simple, but they carried meaning. He nodded, surprised to hear thoughts similar to his own spoken aloud. They shared small stories, nothing heavy, nothing deeply personal. She talked about her community, about traditions passed down through generations, about the importance of patience and balance. He shared stories about the ranch, about storms that changed the land, about animals he had raised from birth. These stories were not emotional confessions, but they built understanding. The rancher found himself looking forward to her visits, though he never admitted it. When a day passed without seeing her, the ranch felt quieter than usual. He told himself it meant nothing. He had lived alone for years. One person could not change that. Yet, something inside him had shifted. He noticed himself preparing extra food without thinking. He noticed how he paid more attention to his appearance, even though no one had ever cared before. These changes were small, almost unnoticeable, but they mattered. She noticed changes too. She saw how his shoulders relaxed when they worked together. She saw how his eyes softened when he spoke about the land. She never commented on these things. She simply remained present. One evening they finished work later than planned. The sun was setting, painting the sky with warm colors. They stood quietly, watching the light fade. The rancher felt the urge to speak, to say something meaningful, but the words did not come. Instead, they shared the silence, comfortable and calm. For him, this silence felt different. It was not empty. It was shared. As she prepared to leave, she thanked him again for allowing her to help. Her gratitude felt sincere. When she walked away, he watched until she disappeared from sight. He stood there longer than necessary, unsure why he felt a strange mix of peace and confusion. That night, as he sat alone in his house, the silence felt less heavy. His thoughts returned to the day, to the shared work and quiet conversations. He realized he had smiled more than usual. This realization unsettled him. He reminded himself that closeness led to pain. He had learned that lesson long ago. Still, the memory of her calm presence stayed with him. It did not feel like a threat. It felt like something steady, something safe. Days continued and her visits remained regular. The bond between them grew slowly, like roots forming beneath the surface. There were no dramatic moments, no sudden changes, just consistency, respect, and quiet understanding. The rancher began to see her not as a visitor, but as part of the land's rhythm. She fit naturally, as if she had always been meant to walk those paths. This thought surprised him. He had never imagined sharing his world with anyone again. He did not yet understand what this connection would mean. He only knew that something was changing, and for the first time in years, that change did not frighten him as much as it once would have. The lonely ranch was no longer just a place of silence. It was becoming a place where connection, slow and careful, had begun to grow. As the days passed, the quiet connection between the rancher and the Apache woman grew deeper, but with that growth came unease. The rancher began to feel emotions he had kept buried for years. At first, he tried to ignore them, focusing on work the way he always had. He told himself nothing had changed, yet his thoughts returned to her more often than he expected. He noticed how easily she fit into his daily routine. She knew when to speak and when to stay quiet. She respected the land and his way of life. This comfort should have felt good, but instead it stirred old fears. He remembered how connection once brought loss. Those memories rose slowly, like shadows stretching across the land at sunset. Without fully realizing it, he began to pull away. He kept conversations shorter. He found reasons to work alone. When she arrived, he greeted her politely but without warmth. He believed distance would protect him. If he did not allow his heart to open, it could not be hurt again. She noticed the change immediately. The calm ease they once shared had shifted. His responses were careful, guarded. She did not push him. She understood that some people carry pain quietly, like a heavy load they never set down. Still, the distance confused her. She wondered if she had done something wrong. One afternoon she came to help repair a water line. The work was slow and required teamwork. In the past, they would have worked side by side in silence, comfortable and focused. This time the silence felt different. It was tense, filled with words left unsaid. The rancher avoided eye contact, keeping his attention on the task. She finally spoke, gently asking if everything was all right. He paused, his hands still. For a moment he considered telling the truth. Instead, he nodded and said he was just tired. It was not a lie, but it was not the whole truth either. That night he lay awake longer than usual. The house felt emptier than before. He realized that pushing her away did not bring peace. It brought restlessness. Memories returned, times when he had chosen distance and lost something meaningful because of it. He wondered if he was repeating the same pattern. The Apache woman reflected on their interactions with care. She valued honesty and balance. She believed that connection required patience but also courage. She decided to give him space while remaining present. She did not stop visiting, but she did not stay as long. Her presence was gentle, never demanding. The rancher noticed this too. Her shorter visits made the days feel longer. He missed the quiet understanding they once shared. He began to question his choice to withdraw. Was he protecting himself, or was he running from something that could heal him? One evening, a sudden storm moved across the land. The wind was strong and the rain came fast. The rancher worked late to secure the animals and equipment. When the storm finally passed, he saw her standing near the shelter, having come to check if everything was safe. Her concern was clear, unspoken but strong. For a moment, all the walls he had built felt unnecessary. He thanked her, his voice softer than it had been in days. They stood together, watching the rain slow to a gentle fall. The tension between them eased, but it did not disappear. After that night, the rancher found himself caught between two paths. One path was familiar, silence, solitude, and safety. The other was uncertain, filled with risk, but also with warmth and understanding. Choosing meant facing his past, something he had avoided for years. He remembered how he had once believed love and connection were signs of weakness. Experience had taught him otherwise. Pain had followed those beliefs. But as he watched the land recover after the storm, green and alive once more, he wondered if healing worked the same way. The Apache woman carried her own thoughts. She believed people were shaped by their experiences but not defined by them. She saw strength in his quiet endurance, but she also saw loneliness. She did not want to force closeness. She wanted it to be chosen freely. Their conversations slowly returned, though they were more careful now. They spoke about the land, the animals, and small daily matters. Beneath these words, deeper emotions waited. Neither was ready to speak them aloud. The rancher began to open up in small ways. He shared a story about a difficult winter long ago. She listened without judgment. Her calm presence made it easier for him to speak. Each shared moment felt like a step across unstable ground. Still, fear remained. On some days he was warm and open. On others, distant and quiet. This inconsistency troubled him, but he did not know how to change it. Years of isolation had taught him habits that were hard to break. She accepted this with patience. She believed trust was built over time, not demanded. She stayed steady, offering kindness without expectation. This steadiness slowly weakened the walls he had built. One afternoon, as they walked along the edge of the ranch, he stopped and looked out across the land. He spoke about how the ranch had saved him during his darkest years. He admitted that being alone had once been necessary. Saying these words aloud felt heavy but honest. She nodded, understanding more than he realized. She spoke about how community and connection had shaped her life. She explained that closeness did not erase pain, but it made carrying it easier. Their words hung in the air, fragile and important. For the first time, he felt that someone truly understood the balance he struggled to maintain. As the sun dipped low, they returned to their tasks. The distance between them had not vanished, but it had changed. It was no longer a wall. It was a space waiting to be crossed. The rancher knew he stood at a turning point. He could retreat into silence once more, or he could take a risk he had avoided for years. The choice weighed on him, heavy and uncertain. That night he sat alone in his house, thinking not just about his fears but about the cost of loneliness. He realized that protecting his heart had also kept it empty. The thought unsettled him, but it also carried hope. Outside, the land rested quietly, unaware of the struggle taking place within him. The path ahead was unclear, but one truth had become impossible to ignore. His life was changing, whether he resisted it or not, and the next step would require courage he was still learning to find. The rancher had spent many years avoiding closeness, believing that distance was the only way to protect his heart. Yet the Apache woman's presence had begun to quietly shift something inside him. He had started to recognize a feeling he thought he had lost long ago: hope. It came slowly, like sunlight breaking through clouds, gentle but impossible to ignore. One late afternoon, after finishing the chores of the day, she stayed a little longer than usual. The sky was painted with warm shades of orange and pink. The rancher had been repairing a gate, and she had helped him steady the post. When the work was done, they both stood quietly, listening to the wind rustle the grass and the distant sounds of animals settling for the night. For a long moment, neither spoke. He felt the weight of years pressing on him. The years of solitude, of guarding his heart, of believing he could manage without anyone. Yet, at the same time, he felt a strange pull to speak, to express what had been building silently for weeks. The Apache woman, sensing the shift in him, looked at him with calm patience. She had always been steady, gentle, and unwavering in her understanding. Finally, she broke the silence, her voice soft but full of warmth. She said something that startled him, not because it was unexpected, but because it was simple and honest. "I want to be closer to you," she said. Her words were not demanding. They did not push him. They simply expressed what she felt, what she had been feeling for a long time. The rancher froze. Her words echoed in his mind, carrying both fear and possibility. He had not expected anyone to care in such a direct way, not in years. His heart, long trained to stay closed, thumped loudly in his chest. For a moment he could not speak. He simply listened, absorbing the meaning of what she had said. After a while he spoke, his voice low and careful. I don't know what to say." The honesty of his words surprised him, and for the first time in years he allowed vulnerability to appear. Vulnerability was uncomfortable, yes, but it was also liberating. He realized he had been carrying silence for so long that speaking, even hesitantly, felt strange and powerful. She smiled gently, not pressing him for more. "You don't have to say anything," she replied. "I just wanted you to know how I feel." Her words were simple, yet they carried a weight that touched him deeply. It was not just what she said, but how she said it, with patience, with respect, and with genuine care. That night after she left, he sat in his house thinking about her words. He replayed them over and over in his mind, wondering if he was ready for something so new, so uncertain. He thought about the years he had spent alone, about the routines that had defined his life, and about the walls he had built around his heart. He realized that those walls, while protective, had also kept him from experiencing something meaningful. Sleep did not come easily that night. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling, considering what it might mean to let someone into his life again. The fear was strong: fear of loss, fear of change, fear of vulnerability. Yet beneath the fear, he felt something he had almost forgotten: a sense of possibility, of connection, of being truly seen by another person. In the days that followed, he found himself observing her more closely. He noticed the small ways she moved through the ranch, how she treated the animals, how she respected the land, and how her presence seemed to bring calm to the quiet world he had built. He realized that her kindness and understanding were not just comforting, They were transformative. She made him feel alive in a way he had not felt in years. He began to test the waters cautiously. He spoke a little more when she visited, sharing small stories from his past, details about the ranch, and observations about the land. He noticed how she listened with patience and without judgment, and each time he spoke, he felt a little lighter. The walls he had built began to crack, not with force but with gentle persistence. One afternoon, while walking along a trail to check the fences, she spoke quietly about her own life. She shared stories of her family, her community, and her experiences growing up on the land. She did not speak to impress or persuade him. She spoke simply and truthfully. He listened, feeling a deep respect for her courage and honesty. Her openness encouraged him to share more of himself, little by little, at a pace that felt safe. The connection between them grew, not suddenly but steadily. They shared laughter when animals misbehaved, quiet moments when the sun set over the horizon, and simple tasks that became opportunities to learn about each other. Through these shared experiences, trust blossomed. The rancher began to understand that closeness did not have to bring pain. It could bring healing, understanding, and companionship. One evening, after a long day, they sat on a wooden bench near the edge of the ranch, watching the stars emerge one by one. The rancher felt the familiar weight of his past, the memories of solitude, and the lessons learned from years of protecting his heart. Yet he also felt warmth, a sense of belonging, and the beginnings of hope. She looked at him with steady eyes and said again softly, "I want to be closer to you." This time he did not feel fear. He felt recognition that she had been patient, steady, and honest all along. Recognition that his heart had been waiting, without him fully knowing it, for this very connection. He reached out, hesitantly at first, and then more confidently, taking her hand in his. The simple act carried years of longing, fear, and unspoken desire. In that moment, he realized that connection, when chosen freely and with care, could be a source of strength rather than vulnerability. From that evening onward, the rancher's life began to change in subtle but powerful ways. He still worked hard, still maintained the ranch with care, but the days were no longer just about survival and routine. They were filled with shared moments, laughter, and understanding. He discovered that companionship could coexist with independence, that trust could grow slowly, and that hearts could heal when met with patience and respect. Though fear and doubt occasionally surfaced, he no longer allowed them to dominate his decisions. He had learned that life's greatest risk was also its greatest reward. By allowing someone to be close, he was not losing himself. He was finding a part of himself he had thought lost forever. And so, on that quiet ranch, where years of loneliness had once ruled, the rancher and the Apache woman began to walk a new path together. It was a path of trust, of care, of mutual respect, and of growing connection. She had spoken her truth, and he had listened, opening his heart in a way that promised not only hope but the possibility of love. The rancher realized that sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is to allow themselves to be vulnerable. That evening, as the sun disappeared completely and the stars lit the sky, he understood that closeness was not a threat. It was a gift, one he was ready to receive. From that day forward, the quiet ranch held a new warmth. Work continued, routines remained, but the presence of someone who truly cared made every moment more meaningful. The rancher finally understood that the years of solitude had prepared him to appreciate connection deeply, and that trust, once given carefully, could bring a sense of peace he had never known. The story was far from over, but in that moment on that quiet land, the rancher felt a sense of completion. Not the kind of ending written in a book, but the kind that comes quietly, slowly, with the realization that one honest, patient connection could transform a life forever. The days that followed were different for the rancher. The quiet rhythm of his life remained, but there was now a new presence that changed everything. The Apache woman's visits were no longer simply occasional. They became part of his life's daily pattern. Her calm presence, patience, and gentle understanding made the ranch feel less lonely. Yet, the changes were gradual. The rancher still struggled with fear of vulnerability, still worried about repeating past mistakes. But something inside him was shifting, a small but growing trust that perhaps life could be shared again. He found himself speaking more freely than before. He shared stories from his past, not just about the ranch, but about the life he had led before solitude became his shield. The Apache woman listened without judgment, offering kindness instead of advice. Sometimes she asked questions, carefully chosen, that encouraged him to open up. Other times she remained silent, simply sitting nearby while he spoke, allowing him to reveal himself at his own pace. The rancher realized how much he had missed these interactions. For years, he had thought silence was enough. He had thought that keeping his thoughts and feelings to himself protected him from pain. Now he understood that it had only kept him from connection, from warmth, from shared moments that could bring joy and fulfillment. Together, they worked on the ranch. She helped with daily chores, but it was more than that. Her presence brought a new energy. Animals seemed calmer, work felt lighter, and even the air felt different. They shared small jokes when a stubborn horse refused to move or when a tool slipped from their hands. They laughed quietly, sometimes even softly shaking their heads at their own mistakes. In those moments, the rancher felt a sense of companionship he had not known in years. Even in routine, the connection between them deepened. They shared meals, prepared together in the small kitchen of his house. They talked about the land, about traditions, about small everyday events that might have seemed insignificant to others, but to them, they were threads weaving their lives together. The rancher began to understand that intimacy was not only about grand gestures. It was in the quiet, shared moments that filled the space around them with meaning. There were still difficult days. Sometimes he would retreat inward, thinking about past losses or the fear of getting hurt again. He would become quiet, withdrawn, and the distance he had built over years would resurface. On those days, she did not force him to speak. She simply stayed nearby, patient and understanding. She offered presence without demand, and her patience gradually weakened the walls he had carefully constructed. One evening, as the sun set behind the hills, painting the sky with soft shades of pink and orange, the rancher finally spoke about his fears. He admitted that he had been afraid of closeness, afraid of being hurt, afraid of repeating old mistakes. The Apache woman listened attentively, her eyes steady and kind. She acknowledged his fears without judgment, telling him that fear was natural but it did not have to control life. This conversation marked a turning point. The rancher realized that his solitude had been both protective and limiting. He understood that true strength was not just in independence, but in the ability to trust and allow someone into his life. He realized that sharing his life with another person did not mean losing himself. It meant creating something greater together. As weeks turned into months, their bond grew stronger. They began to plan small projects together on the ranch, discussing ways to improve the land, care for the animals, and maintain the property. The rancher found joy in these plans, not because of the tasks themselves, but because of the shared experience. Each day became a step forward, a moment of partnership and mutual respect. Their relationship also brought unexpected emotional growth. The rancher learned to express gratitude openly, to recognize small acts of kindness, and to accept help without feeling weak. He began to smile more, to laugh more, and to allow himself to feel happiness that had seemed distant for many years. He discovered that life could be richer when shared, and that vulnerability could lead to connection rather than only pain. The Apache woman also grew through this bond. She saw the rancher's strength, patience, and resilience, but she also recognized his vulnerability. She admired his dedication to the land, his care for the animals, and his quiet determination. Through their shared experiences, she felt her own life expand, understanding that connection could bring growth for both people when it was built on trust, patience, and respect. One calm evening, after a long day of work, they sat outside the ranch house, watching the stars appear one by one. The rancher looked at the Apache woman and realized that he had come to depend on her presence, not out of neediness, but out of genuine companionship. He felt grateful for her patience, her understanding, and the quiet strength she brought into his life. "I never thought I could feel this way again," he said softly, his voice carrying both wonder and relief. "For so long, I believed I was meant to be alone. But now I see that life can be different." She smiled, her eyes reflecting the starlight. "Life is meant to be shared," she replied gently, "not to lose yourself but to grow together." Those words, simple yet profound, settled deeply in his heart. He understood that the choice to allow closeness had changed everything. It was not an immediate transformation. He was still cautious at times, still aware of the risks, but he no longer feared connection in the same way. He had learned that trust and patience could build something lasting, something meaningful, and that sharing life with someone did not diminish him, it strengthened him. Over time, the ranch became a place of warmth and companionship. Work continued, the animals thrived, and the land was cared for with renewed energy. Yet, the true transformation was within the rancher himself. He had moved from years of isolation and quiet fear to a life filled with shared moments, understanding, and emotional connection. The presence of the Apache woman had opened a door he had long thought closed forever. The story of the rancher's life was no longer only about solitude and silence. It became a story of trust, patience, and hope. Each day brought opportunities to learn, grow, and deepen the bond between two people who had come together with respect and understanding. Their shared life was not without challenges, but it was filled with meaning, connection, and a quiet joy that had been absent for many years. By the end, the rancher knew that the most important lesson he had learned was that openness and courage could transform life in ways he had never imagined. The bond he had formed with the Apache woman was not just about companionship. It was about rediscovering the capacity for love, trust, and shared joy after years of solitude. He had spent a lifetime protecting his heart, but in doing so, he had also kept himself from living fully. Now, with patience, understanding, and mutual care, he had found a new way to live. The ranch was still his home, still a place of hard work and responsibility, but it was also a place of warmth, laughter, and hope. The story ended not with grand declarations or dramatic gestures, but with quiet understanding. Two people had found each other, not through force or urgency, but through patience, trust, and honesty. The rancher no longer felt the heavy weight of loneliness. He had learned that one person's presence, offered freely and respectfully, could transform a life completely. As night settled over the ranch, stars twinkling above, he looked at the Apache woman and felt a sense of peace he had never known. The years of isolation had prepared him to truly appreciate this connection. In the stillness of the night, surrounded by the land he loved, he understood that life, when shared with someone worthy of trust and respect, could be brighter, fuller, and infinitely more meaningful. The rancher's journey from solitude to companionship was complete, not as a dramatic story, but as a true testament to the power of patience, understanding, and the quiet courage it takes to allow someone into your heart. And in that quiet ranch, amidst the animals, the land, and the endless sky, two lives had found harmony, proving that even after years of loneliness, connection, trust, and hope could bloom again.